And yet you go back to the 1900s, and certainly if you didn't have silver, you didn't have any money at all. And I'd argue in a way that if you don't have gold or silver, you really don't have any money. All you've really got is currency. So you should have some savings that are in real money, but how much is, isn't an exact fit, but 10% is usually good. 20% probably better. You don't need 100%, 50%, but it's up to the individual. I'm certainly well over the 20%.
When faced with economic uncertainty, it's important to have the right plan to protect your wealth. Build your financial strategy using exclusive insights from globally respected economists at the 2022 StockPulse Silver Symposium, August 30th and 31st. Engage with a community of investors and claim valuable silver bullion prizes. Share in thought-provoking discussions on how to counter today's inflationary environment. Invest in your financial future today.
Welcome back to Inside the Markets, part of the StockPulse.com network here, and joining me, David Morgan here, and from the Morgan Report, and a good friend of the show and a good friend of mine. And David, I appreciate you taking the time as always here. Well, you must be in demand with conditions going the way they are here. But I mean, I guess the good news is inflation's been deemed as running flat. So I think we have a small victory there. I'm sure you believe that one. But all kidding aside here, a smart guy like you, what's he think of the overall conditions here? Let's go back up to this 36,000 foot level and give me a look at what you see.
Well, Rob, at a risk of repeating myself too many times, I mean, I was very fortunate to be in the movie The Four Horsemen film, which you can see for free on on YouTube. And it's a really good look at the cycle of life, so to speak, of how these different aspects of the age of empire develop, and how that's at some point the empire fails or falls or more or less destroyed. And that's where we are. And we're sort of in a global empire. And what I mean sort of is that we have the US dollar as reserve currency. But at the end, there's cracks. And some of the cracks are the petrodollar really doesn't have dominance anymore. The protection team for the Middle East is now Russia, not the United States. Anyone that wanted to settle for oil and anything other than US dollars usually had a short lifespan. That's no longer true. Now you can settle in oil with different currencies, ruble, yuan. You're also seeing a branch out in where you can buy precious metals and how their inventory is stored and allocated. So there's a lot of cracks in the almighty dollar. And the BRICS, of course, is the prime example. So I've given a 30,000 foot view. We don't have to go very deep, other than the overall theme is there is a contraction in the global economy, and the globalists aren't going to win. Everyone is moving to, not everyone, but a great percentage, and more will follow, are moving into an anti-globalist. What does that mean? It means nation state. It means I'm Ukraine. I'm not shipping out any wheat. I'm using the wheat for whomever I deem or my own population. I'm Brazil. I'm not going to ship X because I want it for my own population, or I'm only doing business with the Chinese. I'm not going to do it with the US. And I'm just making that up. But the example fits, because as there is more and more scarcity or perceived scarcity, then nation states will do what we all do. There's a survival instinct on an individual basis, but there's also, so to speak, a survival instinct on a nation state basis. So I'm going to take care of my tribe, and I'm going to use the resources that we have, and we'll only trade with nations that we trust. And we're not going to trade with US dollars. We're going to trade with our currency, or we're going to use gold or whatever. So that's the big picture, and that's the trend. And there aren't too many that see it, because what happens at the top of very hardest thing to do in this business, from my experience, is to call the top. Because the top has got so much momentum, so much enthusiasm, and so many people have been converted to the frenzy that, real estate only goes higher. You can't lose buying real estate. I mean, you hear all this stuff at tops of markets, and we're at the top of the age of empire probably a couple of years ago. But the idea that globalists have control, the WEF has got us under their thumb, they're going to make every move. That's just proposals. That's what they want. That's not what's going to happen.
Let's talk about the Fed here for a minute. It looks to me like a pretty organized plan to do what they've kind of said, wreck the middle class. I mean, you're raising taxes on the middle class. Why would you raise rates into this? Of course, reason being you protect the almighty dollar, which gets diluted on a daily basis. I've seen way too many of your chats explaining this. We just run out another 100 and whatever $billion of fiat money backed by nothing. This is obviously a controlled demolition of the dollar here. So I guess I'm telling you what you already know, or asking you to tell me what you already know. But explain why this makes any sense at all.
Well, people want to have certainty. They want tomorrow to be just like today, and they don't really like to see the apple cart upset. And as this disruption occurs more and more, there are anomalies, meaning there's really big spikes, like take oil going negative for one day, right? Everyone knew you can't be paid to take oil. But yet on the futures market, that's exactly what took place. So my point, Rob, is that the main theme, I'll stick with it, is that to keep the dollar's interest rate moving up, it keeps more suckers in the game. So if you've got negative yields throughout Europe and the dollar's positive yield, let me back up. Many people in, the business I'm in talked about, the U.S. will go negative interest rates. And I said, no, they'll always remain positive because it gives them a competitive edge as far as keeping the suckers in the game, which is what I'm now saying. So it's still ending, but you're less likely to sell out your holdings of dollars if you think that those dollars are going to be more valuable than all these other currencies. Remember, I've emphasized over and over again the exterior upside down pyramid, that as things get more and more contracted, the pyramid contracts. So all the derivatives that are worthless go away. The zombie corporate bonds become worth what they're worth, zero. You have corporate failures. Financial markets are in an upheaval. You get an adjustment in the bond market. You get an adjustment in the stock market. Lots of money goes to money heaven. In other words, that stock was worth 100, is now worth 50. Where did that money go? Nowhere. It's gone. The point is that during the contraction, people will get scared and they'll strive for liquidity. So what's the most trusted liquid asset that exists? And that's the US dollar. Of course, it's the currency of your choice. If you're in Europe, it's the euro. But on a global basis, it's still the piece of paper. And the faith has to be lost in that. And that will come later. Later on in the cycle, the destruction of the age of empire, the dollar will finally get to a point where enough people don't trust it to basically either collapse it. It won't go to absolute zero, and it won't go to what Zimbabwe did, but it will get to an inflection point that causes a very big disruption. And that's what happened in 1979, early 1980, is the inflation rate kept going up and down and up and down, generally up. The trend was up. The official rate was 13%. I forget where interest rates were. I'll stab at it because I lived through, I think, around 7 or 8. Volcker came in and said 20%, and that was well above the inflation rate, the official inflation rate of 13. And that just did it. You couldn't do that now because you wouldn't be able to service the interest on the national debt if interest rates were that high. In fact, the Fed's really backed into the box right now, basis what they're able to generate without expanding their balance sheet. They're barely able to cover what they need to cover right now. So lots of money out there in funny money land, Rob. As you know, this overnight repo market's like $1 trillion. And this is money that could be lent for positive things. It could be for infrastructure, housing projects, feed the homeless, you name it. But it's the bank's money. And they choose to hold it on their balance sheet and loan it overnight to the Fed because it's a risk-free overnight return, and they do it over and over again. So they don't want to risk that money by loaning it out to whomever or whatever. So that, again, kind of goes to the contraction. I mean, if you have all this money expansion and there was real tangible assets as a result of it, I'm not making a case for inflation, but at least you could point out and say, hey, they redid the parks, or they put in a new highway, or they fixed all the potholes, or the dam's been repaired, or we're putting in a new, a new man-made lake that will give us, power, hydropower, and give us more recreation. I mean, any of these things. And none of that really has gone on in any substantive manner for a very, very long time. All that's happened is that the Fed has tried to keep the financial markets happy and the assets high, so most people don't catch on to what's really going on. So all you have to do is lift the covers and look and see how many homeless there are, how many people are going to food banks, how many people I've lost that isn't because they don't like my work, and it's a team, it's not just me, but I don't have money to invest anymore. I'm wiping out my savings. I hate to say it, I've got to go back to work or whatever, and that's the reality, Rob. So I might spend a little too much time there, but I think it's important for people to trust themselves a little more. Unfortunately, we're taught from the get-go that you got to trust the authority figure. If you need an answer, you ask the teacher, or if you got a problem, go to the fire department, go to the policeman, go to the counselor, go to the workout trainer, go to whatever. No, okay, that's all right. But you really should become more self-reliant. Trust your own gut, trust your own feeling. Take a look and observe. You can see a lot by looking if you know where to look.
Yeah, I think the rent and the gas might have woke up the average person. Yeah, so the pictures painted here, and I'm not going to get political with this interview, but pictures painted by the current administration in the U.S. that the economy is strong and whatnot, and I just have no idea what metric they would use. I guess that's maybe why they are going to hire 87,000 to the welcoming committee, IRS agents. So they just here to reach out and say, well, what's your take on that? On anyone even trying to polish this thing up to make this pig look good?
Well, my take's probably a little different than yours, or probably a lot of people's. I mean, just because they say they're going to do something doesn't necessarily mean it will be enacted. Yeah, they could cite it in the law, but it's yet to take place. And again, at these tops, it's really hard to see them because everyone gets in the mindset that they've got all this power, and they really don't. They're really losing power. The system is getting destroyed, and the amount of trust in government's at an all-time low. You can say it's a trust in this administration, which is certainly part of it, but it's also trust in the system. You could put somebody else in there and maybe be more popular and have more popularity than the current resident, but still it's a distrust of the authority figures across the board. I mean, you look at what happened with the FBI, you look at what happens with the collection agency, you look what happens with the SEC, you look what happens with the FDA, you look at what happens with all these three-letter agencies, and there's a huge mistrust, as there should be. And again, it goes back to the collapse of empire. It gets to the point where people are forced to become more self-reliant or more reliant on their own particular community. Cliff Hyde does a good job of it, and I hate to speak for others because, well, that's not what I said, David, but the idea being as SOCs, collective agencies, self-organizing collectives. So, our group of silver nuts, we might not all live together, but we might have certain things that we could trade with each other. Hey, I'd rather have silver than, this government script. And I want I want my teeth fixed, or I want to buy a book from you, or I want to take a vacation or rent a car, whatever it might be. So that's really the direction. It's, again, as I said earlier, it's going more towards self-reliance and self-organizing communities rather than what everyone believes coming out of the mouth of a Schwab, whatever his name is, Klaus, So, but people are fearful. And that's a technique that's been used by the mind controllers for a very long time. And of course, then there's an emotional attachment that's so deep through this process that people cannot overcome their emotion. They actually become addicted to a certain way of thinking, even though it could be proven to be absolutely inaccurate. Doesn't matter. That's called delusion. And there's a lot of people that are delusional because all facts point to one thing, but they still believe something else. And they can't help it. Of course, if you stop them on the street and said, why do you think this way? They wouldn't be able to explain it. They just get emotional and blow you off because you are an insensitive white male. And therefore, you can't understand where they're coming from. Whereas if you use pure logic like Spock in Star Trek, and you were able to get to that level, then they could see probably something they'd never seen before and maybe have a whole breakthrough. And I'm not saying the right is correct and the left is wrong. Believe me, I am like neutral. I don't like politics. And I don't like the structure, the way it has been morphed. I'm not sure, how much government we really need. We certainly need a lot less than we currently have.
Yeah, let's get this conversation upbeat here. You built a career on sound money, doing things that make sense here. I think we've underestimated the dollar can live with cancer apparently a long time, and it has. So, but I suspect, and there are some. I think Jim Rickers did an interview here talking about December 12th, citing a date about a digital dollar and maybe the end of cash. What are the metals going to do in a scenario like that? I mean, I have my own feelings, but I'll reel them in and ask a pro.
Well, the real truth is no one knows for certain. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that. I mean, we have history, which is a good guide, and usually when we go into a reset, however it's implemented, the metals see it coming and they go, relatively high in value to basically everything else because it becomes the most trusted way to do business or to do a monetary transaction. And will that occur this time or not remains to be determined. I think it will. And then, of course, there's the possibility that many have said that the governments will be forced into backing, at least partially, their new digital currency with some type of metal like gold, of course, trying to be funny, but gold backing. I don't think silver will be used in the monetary system in an official way ever again, or for my lifetime at least, or several lifetimes. However, it could be used like some cryptocurrencies on a peer-to-peer basis. But their officialdom will never remonetize silver, in my view, for a very long time, but the public could. So I still am a believer, but what I've taught from the beginning, Robin, you know me well, is have enough, but don't go overboard. If everybody in the United States had 100 ounces, which in the old days represented 3 months worth of savings, so you could live on a 100-ounce bar for 3 months. Can't today, but back when silver was money, considered money, you could. I mean, you think about, 320 million people times with 2 more zeros, that's a lot of silver. And yet you go back to the 1900s, and certainly if you didn't have silver, you didn't have any money at all. And I'd argue in a way that if you don't have gold or silver, you really don't have any money at all. All you've really got is currency. So you should have some savings that are in real money. But how much is, isn't an exact fit. But, 10% is usually good. 20%, probably better. You don't need 100%, 50%, but it's up to the individual. I'm certainly well over the 20%. But, I've been in this market for a long time, and I don't trust government. The markets, for the most part, the establishment, for the most part, I really don't trust a lot. I do trust my ability to, reason and think through this. And I certainly am open-minded. And when I get better data, I change my mind. I've certainly been wrong on many things, and I don't know everything about the metals markets. I'm always learning.
Yeah. So, well, I guess as we kind of wrap up here, David, I'm going to see you here in a couple of weeks, right here in Spokane. You're in your home, your hometown here, I guess now anyway. But give us a little indication of what you might talk about. And I don't know, fast forward anything in the summer, I'd say it'd probably be status quo as we talk then. But the way things are moving now, any surprises you might see?
Could be. I just did a talk recently, Rob, for the Money Show, and in my research to put that presentation together, I discovered a chart of midterm elections and gold's reaction to it. And the seasonality is really, really strong. And that gold goes basically straight up from July onward during midterm elections. So is that going to be the case or not? And of course, seasonality wise, it's more likely than not that it will. So I think we're going to have a pretty good end of the year for the metals, but nothing spectacular. Of course, I haven't said this in a long time, and that's barring out, the two black swans hitting each other. I mean, we're in such a precarious situation now with everything that's going on geopolitically, foodstuffs, water, oil, and the social fabric. Society is getting divided, and it's not just in the U.S. It's a lot of places where there's basically two sides, and there's not a lot of middle ground, and that's very unfortunate. But that's the way it is. And again, it's not a surprise to me based on looking in the past and seeing how these cycles repeat over and over again.
Yeah. Well, certainly hard times to navigate here. So I guess tell people how they follow you. And I know obviously the Morgan Report, talk about that a bit.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. The best thing to do is get on our free list, themorganreport.com. I have a free service, and I also have a paid service that you can see on the subscribe bar. And if you're really interested in what I'm thinking kind of on a daily basis, you can go to our Twitter feed. It's at SilverGuru22. And I post stuff. I have a few people that could post on my account, but most of it's me. I'm not a big Twitter follower. I mean, that's probably where I spend more time on social media. I don't have Facebook. LinkedIn, I'm there, but I really don't do a lot of interfacing, although LinkedIn has been good. If you're in a business or have a business idea, reaching me on LinkedIn is probably the best way, because I don't get many messages there. So I've actually gotten some good interviews from LinkedIn and some good business ideas with people from LinkedIn. So it's all on the blog page. Just go to themorganreport.com, hit the blog tab, and from there you'll see the little icons for the Twitter, the YouTube, LinkedIn, and everything else we've got.
Okay. Well, I always appreciate it, David. And I'll certainly look forward to interacting with you when we're at the symposium together. And I suspect your followers and all your members are going to be very happy here in the shorter term. So, David, I always appreciate the time.
Rob, let me shout out to you. You know I'm going to say this is not rehearsed, but I have to commend you because, first of all, putting any type of symposium together is not easy. I've done it myself a few times, and it can be harrowing. In fact, I did one that was going to be in Las Vegas with Chris Martenson, pretty much after he wrote his book. And I was so enamored with what he did that we were going to, share the stage. I'd call him the keynote, myself backup or whatever. Unfortunately, we just couldn't sell enough tickets, and we weren't out there to rip anybody off. We were there to just try to make it happen. And we had to close it down at the last minute and refund everybody their money, which we did. But I know it's hard. It's not easy. You get there and you enjoy it and have the camaraderie and you get to see your friends and talk to CEOs of mining companies and, some of your people you love or hate in the industry and hear what they have to say. And it get exciting. At least last year it got very exciting during one of the presentations. I know I was there. And yet very little, in my opinion, is very few really stop to consider how much work went on behind the scenes to put that whole thing together. And I know. So thank you, Rob.
Well, no, thank you. And you're a big part of that as well. And you're your colleague there. So we'll look forward to seeing you there and appreciate the kind words. So David Morgan, morganreport.com. Thanks again. Look forward to always hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you, Rob.